1966. Foi organizada entre 13 e 23 de outubro uma programação intitulada Nine Evenings, Theatre and Engineering. Portanto, 9 apresentações resultantes da colaboração entre artistas e engenheiros e cientistas. No fundo, eu neste momento, suponho, a porta tem aqui, nesta sala, estão uns cartazes, e na Escola de Belas Artes de Paris vai ser passado uma destas evenings, que eu ainda não tenho, portanto deve estar agora a ser recentemente, mas já, neste momento, existem disponíveis no mercado o Open Score de Rauschenberg, que nós vamos ver, e as Variation 7 de John Cage. Mas, enfim, isto para vos dizer o quê? Portanto, acontece no 69º Regimento em Nova Iorque, um edifício onde tinha sido utilizado para fazer o Armory Show de 1913, um edifício muito difícil, com um enorme eco para fora, não era o sítio ideal, mas era o sítio disponível, e assim foi. Estamos a falar de uma programação que envolveu artistas como Lucinda Childs, Alex Hay, Deborah Hay, Steve Paxton, foi o inventor do contato de improvisação, uma técnica de movimento que continua a ser utilizada hoje em dia, Yvonne Rainer, John Cage, David Tudor, Robert Whitman, por exemplo, entre outras participações. E todos estes artistas faziam tudo, portanto, no dia em que a performance era de um, outro ia cobrar bilhetes, outro ia fazer, de direção de cena, enfim, as pessoas distribuíam-se e foram colaborando, tornando possível todas estas apresentações. Foi convidada, talvez como é que se chama a companhia dos Bell Telephone Laboratories, ou seja, cientistas e engenheiros desta companhia, convidados para colaborar com estes artistas. Basicamente, o que aconteceu foi que os artistas foram chamados para fazer tudo o que queriam que a ciência que pusesse à sua disposição para os seus trabalhos. Um rol de pedidos, só não tinham teletransporte, porque na altura não era muito falado, porque de resto a verdade é que este trabalho implicou umas manigâncias tecnológicas, como por exemplo a utilização de infravermelhos, mas enfim, foi uma colaboração que deixou marcas, ouvindo tanto artistas como estes cientistas e engenheiros a falar, percebe-se que foi um momento excepcional de partilha e que cada um com os seus saberes e desejos tornaram possível um acontecimento que de outra maneira não teria acontecido.
In January 1966, 10 artists from New York and 30 engineers from Bell Telephone Laboratories began a collaboration that resulted in a series of dance, music, and theater works. They all incorporated the new technology. 9 evenings of theater and engineering took place in October 1966 at the 69th Regiment Armory in New York. The performances were recorded and filmed both in color and in black and white. While this material can of course not represent the artist's work in full, it has now been assembled by Barbara Schultz into 10 films that document each artist's work. 9 evenings came about through the generosity of the artists, the engineers, and our many friends. But above all, it was Robert Rauschenberg's commitment to the collaboration that provided the spirit and the energy that made it all happen.
Structure.
Oh, I am Carol Perlice.
I am Grace Panicco.
Bob Solomon.
I am Dave Sagarin.
I am Aviva Stone.
I'm Lars Lorosh. I am Yossi Baskin.
My name is Norby Bullock. I am Eliza Tan.
I am Cosmos Robert Savage.
I am Lou Hall.
I am Walter Siegel.
I am Charles Hall.
I am Barbara Wald.
I am Gail Rockford.
I am Jen Preston.
I am Alice Preston.
I am Christina Wheeler.
I'm Dan Structure.
Oh, I am Carol Perlice.
I am Grace Panicco.
Bob Solomon.
I am Dave Sagarin.
I am Aviva Stone.
I'm Lars Lorosh. I am Yossi Baskin.
I was working at Bell Telephone Laboratories at the time, but I was of course also aware of the tremendous explosion in the New York art world. When the idea of 9 evenings came about, I organized meetings between artists and engineers. It was Larry Hylos, Harold Hodges, and Jim McKee who built and tested the electronic equipment for Open Score and who collaborated with Robert Rauschenberg. The tiny transmitter in the handles of the tennis rackets in OpenScore were built by Bill Kaminsky. 9 Evenings was truly the first one-to-one collaboration between artists and engineers.
An area of intellect that was so isolated, colliding with something that had no direction, you know, which is what I think art should. That's the way it should be going. Both of them shared their infinite possibilities and impossibilities.
But it really opened up the mind.
And the spirit. I think the engineers liked the spirit, and I think the artists liked the mind. And the guys were working for nothing. We were working for nothing. What a way to run a business, huh?
It was very interesting. I think when you get on the technical side of things, you tend to look at things in just a certain way because of the technical limitations of it. And here is this whole bunch of people that came along and wanted to do something else with the technology. And it was a fun time, is what it really was. And the artists seemed to be enjoying themselves when they were working through it. So I'd classify the whole thing as a very fun experience.
For some of us, like me, it was like opening up a window to a whole new world. And once we saw this, we didn't want to let it go. I missed the intellectual challenge of trying to make the artist's vision come through.
Gee, I got a deeper appreciation for the artist per se. I began to realize that, hey, while they were doing things that were different, they were really just people like the rest of us, with some tremendous imagination and with some forethought as to what they could work with, what was available to them. Very stimulating.
We had become interested in the process that we were involved in, which was the meeting, marrying and mating of artists and scientists in a kind of coupling that was to produce some form of, hopefully, synergistic, new wrinkle in artistic thought and scientific thought. Hopefully that they would repel each other and attract each other in some strange dance, and we would get out of that the flowering, the explosion, the evolution of something for the future.
The importance of 9 Evenings of Art and Technology has been largely overlooked because so many things took place after it. Because it is literally the first time that artists formally used technology and electronics in their work. It was the seed from which I took and became one of, along with the many other people, which now number in the millions of people using technology in their art, with other people. But Bob originated the idea. It arose in his heart, and Billy's and everyone else.
With the engineering, the piece has a kind of an elegance which is consistent with the nature of the piece. And as far as I'm concerned, this has got to be one of the most sharp and focused, coherent and solid of Bob's performance pieces, or theater pieces. I think it is, and which makes it, of course, one of the most wonderful performance pieces of all time, anywhere, by anybody. The structure of the piece, I think, is also kind of interesting because it's also very unusual in the sense that it's almost classic. You have almost a beginning and a middle and an end in a regular conventional sense. It's almost like it's straight out of the 18th century. You can almost imagine somebody like that being reborn now and understanding what this piece was like. So you start out with the tennis game.
Frank Stella, and Mimi Karnick came up dressed in their usual tennis outfits. But the racket that they used had been wired, as they say nowadays.
The rackets have the handle drilled out so they can hide the transmitter, which fits into here, and a battery, and the output of the transmitter, which is FM. We're tuned to the high end of the FM band above the other stations. The light-colored wire wrapped around the racket served as the antenna for the transmitter here. Around the stage were several FM receivers, pretty standard type radios, FM radios, that were picking it up and is being amplified so that it made a very loud noise when each hit was made.
We had 1 kilowatt lights surrounding the armory, lighting up the tennis courts, and the electrical impulse of the bomb were supposed to switch off the light. Of course, in the last moment, we couldn't make these work. Impossible. 5 minutes before Bob's performance was going to start, when the decision was, okay, the show must go on, we'll do it by hand.
Well, we hit the ball back and forth so we could make noise. Yeah, I mean, she didn't try to hit the ball where I couldn't get it. That would just waste a lot of time. It was pretty easy. I was just nervous being in front of all those people, and I brought this young lady, Mimi Kanarek, who was the pro at our club, to play with me, and she was a good player, and she fed me the ball, and then we could keep it going. The idea was to have the rallies as long as you could and put out as many lights as possible.
The tennis game slowly sort of diminishes itself in terms of the brilliance of the lighting. It just and vanishes, and then the ghost game continues in the dark with the sound of the tennis rackets going in the dark, and you hear these ghost names being read in the dark. And all of a sudden, ghost people appear on these screens overhead, making unknown, unknowable kind of mass gestures. Not like the things that you see or associate with performance or dance or calisthenics or anything else.
He needed to be able to photograph with a camera, a TV camera, in the dark. Well, this required infrared lenses, infrared sensitive Vidicons. Such devices were available at that time, but only to the military. They were classified. I happened to run across a gentleman in southern New Jersey experimenting with an imported sensitive material within the infrared range. And we were able to get a promise of a infrared camera with all the infrared sensitive equipment for a demonstration, which was arranged in New York at Rauschenberg's place.
It all was projected on 3 large screens at an angle about 20 to 30 feet high over the audience. As you were sitting facing the floor, you would feel that these 500 people were on the floor, but you had no understanding of where they were in space.
I had a group of about 500 people that I'd gotten by donating to the Red Schoolhouse in Dalton and got the parents who were grateful for my helping the school. And I didn't want them to see anything. There was no rehearsal. They were given a list of 10 gestures, and it was made up of very ordinary things that you could do. One of the things that you had to do is in the dark. You just move around a lot and hug anybody that you bump into. And another one is like pull your white handkerchief out. And all this looked great on the infrared TV, I thought.
It was worked out that I would sit in the balcony along with a couple of other signalers, and we sat behind each had a bank of flashlights, which were in a row along the railing, and we got our instructions from the master bank of flashlights, and if 3 lights, for example, were turned on, we would then turn 3 from our bank on, and people below would then be able to see one or the other sets of lights and then know what activity to do.
And what I did was the camera for Bob's piece, Open Score, but the lead up to it was that I was the cameraman in Falstrom's piece, shooting Bob. It was just a shot of Bob. I went in tighter a couple of times until I got to a frame like that, and we held it, and then this was on the big screen. In Falstrom's piece, Bob was the superstar. But in Bob's piece, the audience was the superstar. And one treated the audience the same way that I treated Bob, with sort of great love and tenderness and with great care.
A night vision camera which turned them all into a Nordic people. That is, they were all blonde in this light. As I recall, the light was a little bit green around them. It looked like a huge crowd of blonde people underwater.
So 500 new stars were born.
Oh.
And then only about 450 showed up the next day because Nine Evenings got such a bad review in the New York Times.
Oh. So they don't.
They didn't want to go again.
They didn't want to be in that bad
They wanted
performance.
to be a popular star, not just a star.
When the piece is over, that's when it's over. And it's so solid and perfect at that point. You want this piece to go on forever. You want it to last, continue. But it can't continue because it's perfect the way it is. In the second performance of the piece, there's sort of like a coda at the end, almost like a recap of the song being sung in the sack, sitting there. It's almost like that pop song refrain about the song has ended, but the melody lingers on. You want this piece not to stop.
I thought, well, you know, this is a very hard piece to take as theater, and so I put Simona Giselle Forte. She's a great dancer, but she sings fantastically. She does all those Italian sounds that most people can't make. And so I put her in a bag and carried her through the audience just to soften up the performance. And the armory held the sound so nicely. It was a feast. But if it's the first time that it's never been done, there's no preparation for any sense of being there. And I think that's why so many people who did brave coming, probably most of their experience afterwards, thinking, I shouldn't have. But now are so proud. It's a very small club of people who brag about, I saw 9 evenings. That's real elite.
Yes, really.
It couldn't be done today. It was done before its time, and it's too late now. That's a rare moment.
The wonderful thing about this piece is that, you know, like any great work of art, when it's over, it's not over. You have it in your head for the rest of your life.
Nós em inteligência falamos do fim da hierarquia do espaço, algo que era conhecido até à altura, não é? Aquela questão de que era importante e existia um palco central. Com Nijinsky há, de facto, essa alteração, com Terminologia, isso termina por completo, mas não há hierarquização do espaço cênico, inclusivamente. É como foi corrigido, o espaço cênico é gerido também, muitas vezes, aleatoriamente. Os tais eventos que falava há pouco são um exemplo disso, da própria adaptação ao espaço, porque são peças que acontecem no sítio que estiver disponível e, portanto, são reformuladas consoante as condições desse mesmo sítio. Se é um espaço maior, depois conta com mais valias, se é um espaço menor, retiram-se alguns, altera-se a duração, altera-se a sequência de movimento, alteram-se as direções consoante as características de cada lugar. E, claro, a utilização dos ditos espaços não convencionais nunca foi problema para nenhum destes artistas, muito pelo contrário. Aliás, reparem, há casos, por exemplo, uma altura em Itália, que num evento se perdeu rauschamente uma série de figurinos, de materiais também para cenários, e houve um plano caminhar, mas já não sei dizer, mas houve uma chatice qualquer, e portanto perderam-se os figurinos e cenários, ou não podiam chegar, de maneira que rauschamente andou pelas ruas. Suponho que era a tendência a recolher o cenário, né? Depois utilizou para a peça, com certeza. Portanto, esta é o final das relações hierárquicas entre os vários artistas implicados numa circunstância de apresentação a público. Eles trabalham autonomamente, juntam-se sem que isso interfira com a produção de cada um deles. O processo de criação, claro, é investido de um enorme significado e todos estes fenómenos resultam de uma aproximação entre arte e vida que é continuamente apontada a propósito das experiências que nesta altura se faziam. Em termos de colaborações também, Cunningham e Cage trabalharam com nomes que todos nós vamos ouvindo falar, como seja o Fausto, o Jonathan Jones, o Andy Warhol, por exemplo, não sei se já viram imagens disso, há um trabalho de Cunningham no cenário. Existem uma série de almofadas prateadas que vão voando, são cheias de hélio e, portanto, vão flutuando no espaço, os bailarinos vão dançando e, portanto, vão se encostando e batendo nelas e elas vão se agitando conforme os movimentos dos bailarinos. É isso que resulta precisamente da colaboração com Andy Warhol. Vou mostrar então um excerto de um filme acerca de Cage e Cunningham, feito por um cineasta chamado Elliot Kaplan, que fez, lá está, é além da parte do filme, não é, que colaborou recorrentemente com esta dupla, fez uma série de trabalhos com eles.
Family symbolizing Sociological comedian, his house about him with invariable God's church. At one time annoyed. Jesse's right our cadence with a peach valaplat. Pick up for flesh, Nelly. Guinness thought tool in Jimmy Dinners. A nice how do you do.
Tie cutting was an unintended one. Huh? John appeared with a frock coat, you know. Yeah, so I thought it is a hypocrisy that he is bringing down all, you know, rules of music and concert going and then appear in frock coat, and he did it. So I thought, I will cut that off. Well, I heard John is not rich guy, and then frock coat would cost a few $100s. It will be, you know, unfair. I thought I will then cut a tail of the neck, white shirt tail. Shampoo, I intended to shampoo. Number one, he didn't come with frock coat, but he came with normal, you know. Then I took shirts off, then I found that he has no undershirts. I think it's impolite. And then I saw his tie, you know. So instead of this, I cut his tie. I never liked his tie because he makes very short ties.
The collaboration is in their intent to create a work and a performance of time, and yet they're not going to impose their individual wills on it, and they let you make the judgment as to what the work's worth is. And it's the importance of removing their own prejudices and their own need to say, this is mine, this is how I perceive art, this is how I perceive music. That kind of intent is almost impossible to find because everyone has their own egos and their own.
Yeah, we have a real response of your Michael.
Yeah, I can't disagree more.
Well, one of the great problems is water. The reason that 2/3 of the water has to be used to keep the lawns green. And if they would all just put in cactus and local plants, then the water thing wouldn't be far less. But they think they have to have those green lawns.
Oh, they won't let me wear my blue jeans in Kyoto.
Oh, why do you have to
and
wear?
They found from Toshi that I will insist on wearing blue jeans. So they're going to cover me up with a kimono.
How marvelous. I hope they get a picture of that.
They
Your
will.
ethnic costume, that's what it says.
They will.
Do that. That's marvelous.
I said in my letter to them, could they consider blue jeans ethnic? And apparently they can.
They can.
I said my jacket was Amish. Actually, I have new pants and everything. I should think they'd let me.
I think that dance still does fascinate me just as much as it ever did. It remains, in that sense, unknown. And for that I'm grateful, frankly, because it has such fluid, like water. It just goes through your fingers. You know it's there, it's a substance, but at the same time it disappears. And it's so full of what to me, anyway, are possibilities.
Desculpa, eu vou falar de linhas de lutas que eu vos mostrar, pelo menos uma parte, em que Kahneman fala aos seus discípulos, e é um testemunho muito Muito interessante.
Everything hurts, and but I struggle. I even do exercises in bed before I get out, just to start, and then I get up and teeter to the kitchen to make some water for tea, and then I eventually get here and sit down with the tea, and the first thing I do is write and do this, and in the meantime the two cats come. So we talk, sometimes in French, they don't reply, sometimes in English, they don't reply. I have cereal for breakfast, and I go back and keep stirring it, and tea, and then when that's all over with, and we've done all that, then I have to stand up and begin to do my work. But in the meantime, I've done all of this, the drawing and the writing and all the rest of it. If I do an hour further of exercises, then when that's over, I get ready to go to the studio. So I get there around 10:30. The first day we worked, which was in the studio in West Bend, I said, well, Misha, I said, the only thing we do is just begin. He said, yes.
The intent of his work were a mystery to me until a certain moment when I felt emotional about his work suddenly. Being a classical dancer in the past, for me, there is certain confused familiarity in Mercer's work because he sort of deconstructed classicism in his language. He was interested always in the position of a human body in space and angles of it. He gave me material which is very doable, of course, but demanded a lot of control. He gives you precise steps, but then allows you to play with timing.
further, arch your spine, back there someplace, and come up. 1 and 2 and. In the beginning, I had decided that using dancers who were trained other ways didn't work for me. So I began to teach, in other words, and to try to find ways of conveying physical behavior the way I thought that I would be able to utilize. I prefer having the possibilities that a woman gives in movement as well as the possibilities a man gives. And they are in one sense the same, but they are also different. Women, so often to me, have a kind of continuous quality, which can go on really for quite a long time. Whereas with the man, so often it seems in spurts, up and down. There is a difference, and they do sort of complement each other. I wanted to make something for the dancers which had some kind of fluid quality about it. And so over the water. So that out of that comes the name pond wave. This hopping with it and standing still and lifting your legs up and down and so on. Then everybody can say it's wrong, so whatever, that's what I don't mind, that's scripture. I remember as a child with the lake, going to the lake and skipping stones. And I just loved to do that, but would skip a number of times across. So there was one step, I'm sure that must come from that, about how they don't really, they jump, but not high, they just go over, and then I added 2 or 3 arms, which made it harder, but more interesting to look at. Almost anything you look at, you can see in terms of movement. Not steps necessarily, just movement. How many of you ever watch the way people step up on the curb or off the curb? They always shift their weight, and usually onto the right foot because we're mostly right-sided. How many of you, in your experience, when you cross your hands, you realize what thumb you put on top, change it, and see what it's like. So that you have a different experience about movement, even the slightest that. You have to keep looking. I think there's always something. For me, there's always someplace movement. Countless, my cats, I watch them when they move around in the heat, where they go, what they do, the way they lie down, the way they get up. My drawing skill is at minimum anyway, and I can't make straight lines, so I decided plants and animals. I think it's the thing that probably attracted me perhaps in the beginning really was the fact that the animal and bird movement is so easy to walk.
Sim, a minha nação até, quando eu até aos 80, depois consegui modelar a prose
You can't move as animals move in the exact sense. You can pretend to imitate. but they can't really move the way we do. If one enjoys movement of any kind, which I do very much, I think that that's really part of it. Watching someone, whether a dancer, or whether an animal or a bird, I think for me that's a very, well, it has always been an intense part of my experience.
Este testemunho sobre esta importante componente da experiência, que é ver o movimento. Não tem que ser de humanos, né? O movimento de animais é algo que sempre nos sou muito cânida, né? E isto é como quem a disponibilidade tem para ouvir as coisas que acontecem, não é? É a atenção, aí está, não é a atenção ao que nos rodeia, e por isso isto é que é muito distinção entre arte e vida, não é? Que é isto, onde é que este homem para de trabalhar? Então vou-vos mostrar só, quero só dar para outro assunto, e tem que ver com esta tem que ver, continuamos nesta questão das tecnologias, mas das novas possibilidades que a tecnologia tem oferecido em termos de circunstância performativa. Vamos ver um pedacinho deste Beach Birds for Camera. Beach Birds é um trabalho de Canada que ele, nesta altura, faz filmes especificamente para filme, reconhecendo que, evidentemente, isso há possibilidades, né, de circunstâncias de apresentação, não haveria. Vamos ouvir o que ele diz sobre isso e um pequeno momento desta fotografia.
Beach Birds for Camera is a version for film of the dance Beach Birds. It is in that sense a different dance from the stage production, hence the title. Stage and camera are two different media. The first having a static frame in which the action takes place. The stage proportion remains fixed and the eye relates what is happening on stage to the frame, the body remaining relatively the same size against it. With camera, different sizes appear. The dancers can be shown fully or in part. Detail, for example, takes on an importance not possible on stage. One thinks of the close-up. The moving camera gives a flexibility to the space, and in turn to the time that can complement and add to the measurements of the dance. I began my work on the stage Beach Birds by putting various separate phrases of movement into the memory of life forms, the dance computer with which I work. Later, these phrases, along with others, were utilized in the version for stage, and further along, thought out, and utilized again in somewhat different ways for the film. Putting dance on film or video is of interest to me. The two media are visual. The experience is gained through the eye of both. The use of camera has extended the sense of what dance can be, how movement behaves, and further how we see it. The two media do not compete. Each abides in its own territory.
Só para introduzir a última questão que vamos abordar hoje, tem que ver então com estas novas possibilidades tecnológicas. Penso que tem que ver com esta utilização do life forms por parte de Cunningham.